This is the shit, total shit. They ruined my life all over.
Pay close attention to the footage recovered from the truck's cabin camera. It shows Derek starting what appears to be a routine cargo delivery to Atlanta. About 30 minutes into the drive, as he reaches the edge of the city, a notification appears on his phone. He looks at the screen, then suddenly throws the phone against the windshield. The next clip shows the truck already heading in the opposite direction. Derek's driving is unstable, and his movements suggest he is no longer in control. Footage from an intersection camera captures the truck running a red light without slowing down. A street camera records the vehicle speeding through a residential area at a dangerous pace. Moments later, cabin footage shows Derek turning toward a residential street leading to a house. The truck crashes into the home, killing 2 people inside. Now, here's what actually happened. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The case began with a collision in a residential block on the east side of Orlando, Florida. At 12:41 a.m. on June 12, 2023, a tractor-trailer left the paved portion of Lakewood Drive, crossed a yard, and struck the front wall of 2147 Lakewood Drive. The impact collapsed the living room and drove the cab deep into the house. Residents reported hearing a single impact and then car alarms. A nearby doorbell camera recorded the truck entering the frame and continuing straight into the house without visible swerving. Debris was spread through the front rooms, and the structure showed heavy damage concentrated at the point of impact. Inside the room, 34-year-old warehouse clerk Marcus Bell was found near the former window area with injuries incompatible with life. Paramedics confirmed death at the scene. Also in the living room was 27-year-old customer service representative Alana Brooks. She was located under collapsed material close to the impact point with crush injuries and shallow breathing. She was transported to Orlando Regional Medical Center and later pronounced dead. Medical staff linked both deaths directly to the vehicle impact and structural failure. The driver of the tractor-trailer was identified from his commercial driver's license as 30-year-old Derek Vaughn, a long-haul freight driver who lived on the same street. Vaughn resided with his wife, Alana, in a rented apartment in a 3-story building at 2129 Lakewood Drive, within sight of Bell's home. Fire crews reached the cab within minutes. They found Vaughn conscious, pinned at the legs, with visible fractures and facial lacerations, and used hydraulic tools to free him. Initial radio traffic described a major crash with injuries and a residence strike. Within minutes, however, observations at the scene raised doubts about an accidental cause. Officers noted the absence of skid marks on the asphalt leading to the yard. Tire tracks in the grass formed a direct line from the street to the living room wall without visible deviation. Residents told officers that large trucks did not usually enter Lakewood Drive. Officer Denise Klein of the Orlando Police Department reached Vaughn as rescue personnel were treating him. Her body microphone recorded his statements. According to her later report, Vaughn repeatedly said, "I saw it. I saw everything," and then asked, "Is she in there?" When Klein asked whom he meant, he replied, "My wife. She's in there with him." Vaughn did not ask about the number of injured people or whether anyone had survived. His focus stayed on whether his wife and Bell were still in the house. Paramedics stabilized Vaughn with a neck collar, splints, and intravenous medication. Despite apparent pain, he responded correctly when asked his name, the date, and his location. A fire captain asked whether he had fallen asleep or blacked out while driving. Vaughn answered, "No, I knew where I was going," and gave no further detail. As additional patrol units arrived, officers conducted a brief canvass of surrounding homes. Neighbors identified Marcus Bell as the sole occupant of 2147 and described him as a warehouse employee who worked irregular shifts. They identified Alana as Derek's wife and confirmed that she normally came and went from the apartment at 2129, not from Bell's address. One neighbor, 45-year-old delivery driver Norman Patel, said he had seen Bell and Alana talking outside on several occasions but had never heard arguments involving Derek or any loud disputes among them. By 1:30 a.m., supervisors from the Traffic Homicide and Violent Crimes units had set a perimeter around the damaged residence and the disabled truck. Investigators photographed the vehicle's position, the impact point, and the interior of the living room. They documented the locations of Marcus and Alana and the direction of debris. The physical layout matched the doorbell video and supported the conclusion that the truck had continued straight into the house without braking or evasive action. Records from the company indicated that the truck had been scheduled to return to a distribution center located several miles away, reachable by larger roads that did not pass through Lakewood Drive. From that information, supervisors concluded that Vaughn's presence on the residential street represented a departure from his assigned route. Before Vaughn was transported, Officer Klein informed him that his spouse had been located inside the house and taken to the hospital in critical condition. According to her report, Vaughn responded, "I knew she was there," and did not ask why she was present in Bell's residence or whether anyone else had survived. He repeated, "I knew it," several times while medics prepared him for transport. Detective Leonard Hayes of the Orlando Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit received the file on the morning of June 12, 2023. His assignment was to determine whether the crash on Lakewood Drive was accidental or deliberate. He began with the people involved, starting with the driver. Records listed Derek Vaughn, 30, as a long-haul driver employed by Sunstate Regional Freight. He had held a commercial license for 8 years and worked for Sunstate for 5. Performance reviews described him as reliable until the previous year, when supervisors noted late check-ins and missed calls at scheduled stops. Marriage records and the lease showed that Derek lived with his wife, 27-year-old customer support worker Alana Brooks, in a rented apartment in a 3-story building at 2129 Lakewood Drive. 2 houses down, at 2147, lived 34-year-old warehouse clerk Marcus Bell, the sole occupant of the single-story home struck by the truck. Police databases showed no prior incident reports linking any of the 3. With little history of open conflict, Hayes turned to digital records. A warrant to Derek's wireless carrier and email provider produced billing transactions and device notifications. One entry stood out. On June 7, 2023, Derek purchased a compact Wi-Fi camera from an online retailer, shipping it to the Lakewood Drive address and paying with a debit card linked to his checking account. Confirmation emails went to his personal address. Internet service logs for the Vaughn apartment showed that on June 9 at 10:18 p.m., a new device with the camera manufacturer's hardware signature connected to the home router. Within minutes, configuration traffic established a link between that device and a cloud account registered to Derek's email. Metadata showed that motion alerts were enabled and set to forward to Derek's mobile phone. To learn where the camera had been placed, Hayes obtained a search warrant for the exterior of Marcus Bell's property. During execution of that warrant, officers located a small camera mounted under the eave near the front living room window of 2147. The lens faced the glass. The serial number matched the purchase record recovered from Derek's email. The device was powered and connected when removed and logged as evidence. Hayes then requested footage from a city-owned utility pole camera near the intersection serving the Bell residence. Reviewing frames from the late evening of June 9, he saw a male figure with Derek's approximate height and build walking from the direction of 2129 toward 2147, carrying a small object. The person stopped near the living room window area for several minutes before returning along the same route. The timing matched the new device's first appearance on Derek's home network. Under a separate warrant, the camera manufacturer provided account logs and stored video. For several days after installation, recordings showed only background motion, changes in light, short clips of Marcus walking through the living area alone, and occasional empty room activity. There were no saved sessions indicating extended viewing from Derek's phone during that period. The sequence changed on June 12. At 12:03 a.m., the camera registered motion and started streaming. At 12:04 a.m., the account log showed a mobile device associated with Derek's credentials opening the live feed. The stream remained active for several minutes. Portions of the same video were later recovered from Derek's damaged phone. In the clearest segments, timestamped between 12:04 and 12:07 a.m., Alana is seen entering Marcus Bell's front door, moving into the living room, and sitting next to him on the couch against the interior wall. Subsequent fragments show prolonged kissing and physical closeness. Both appear relaxed and familiar. There is no sign of argument or coercion. Truck GPS logs documented the vehicle traveling toward Orlando at highway speeds until just after midnight. At approximately 12:06 a.m., within minutes of the live view connection to the camera, the data showed a reduction in speed and an exit onto a cloverleaf. The route then reversed, with the truck re-entering the highway in the opposite direction, now heading back toward Orlando. As the truck approached Orlando, the GPS trace diverged from the normal path to the distribution center. Instead of remaining on the main approach, the vehicle exited toward the residential district that included Lakewood Drive. Company dispatch logs showed no new instructions or reroutes issued to Derek during this interval. There were no breakdown reports or mechanical alerts that might explain an unscheduled detour. Traffic cameras recorded Derek Vaughn's return to Orlando in the early morning of June 12, 2023. After the highway U-turn documented in the GPS data, municipal cameras tracked the tractor-trailer along the inbound route. At 12:29 a.m., a camera over an expressway ramp captured the vehicle entering the city limits at a speed above the posted limit. 4 minutes later, another camera at a major intersection showed the truck proceeding through a yellow light without slowing. The route data from the truck's telematics matched these images and confirmed continuous movement toward the residential grid that included Lakewood Drive. As the vehicle left the main road network, neighborhood cameras showed a progressive increase in risk. At 12:38 a.m., a camera at the intersection of Glenview Avenue and Lakewood Drive recorded the tractor-trailer turning into the residential street. The turn was wide but controlled, with no indication of swerving or mechanical trouble. At 12:40 a.m., a stop sign-controlled intersection 1 block from Marcus Bell's house captured the truck rolling through the sign without coming to a complete stop. The brake lights flickered briefly but did not remain engaged. Witness statements from residents who observed the truck described its path as straight and not out of control. Crash reconstruction specialists from the Orlando Police Department and the State Highway Patrol examined the scene later that morning. They measured tire tracks on the approach to 2147 Lakewood Drive and mapped them against the roadway and yard. The pattern showed a single continuous arc from the street over the curb and across the front lawn. There were no pre-impact skid marks on the asphalt and no gouges that would suggest sudden steering loss. Grass compression and soil disturbance indicated that the truck's speed remained relatively constant across the yard. Inside the damaged cab, forensic technicians conducted a search. On the passenger side floorboard, they located a smartphone in multiple pieces, with screen glass embedded in the dashboard and center console. Impact patterns suggested the device had been thrown or slammed against a hard surface shortly before the collision. The phone's SIM card and memory components were intact enough for later data extraction. A separate navigation unit remained mounted on the windshield with no signs of similar damage. Once physicians deemed Derek stable enough for questioning, Hayes conducted the first formal interview at 9:30 a.m. on June 12. The conversation took place in a hospital room. After reading Derek his rights, Hayes asked him to describe the hours leading up to the crash. Derek confirmed his employment with Sunstate Regional Freight and his assigned route from the Tampa area warehouse to the Orlando Distribution Center. He admitted diverting from that route but initially described the change as just wanting to go home first. Hayes then asked about the Wi-Fi camera recovered from Marcus Bell's property. Derek paused before acknowledging that he had purchased and installed the device. He said he had suspected something between Alana and Marcus for several months, citing their frequent conversations outside and what he called a different way she talked about him. Derek stated that he waited until Marcus's house was dark one night and then mounted the camera facing the living room window. He admitted connecting the feed to his phone and enabling motion alerts. When Hayes turned to the night of June 12, Derek's account matched the digital records in several respects. He said that while driving his assigned route, he received a notification from the camera application and opened the live view. He claimed that he saw Alana enter Marcus's house and sit close to him on the couch. Asked what happened next, Derek responded that he stopped thinking about the delivery and focused only on getting back to Lakewood Drive. He described leaving the highway, turning around and heading back toward the neighborhood. Hayes asked whether Derek remembered any attempt to break or turn away from the house before impact. Derek shook his head and said, "I just aimed for it." When pressed on whether he understood that people were inside the room he struck, he answered, "I knew they were there." He also admitted throwing his phone against the dashboard at some point after watching the video, stating that he didn't want to see it anymore. Detective Leonard Hayes continued to treat 2147 Lakewood Drive as a homicide scene rather than a traffic incident. Before sunrise on June 12, 2023, he ordered the tractor-trailer, the torn exterior wall, and the collapsed living room sealed as a single evidence field. Entry and exit points were logged. No debris could be moved unless required for structural safety or medical access. The event data recorder from the tractor was removed and downloaded. Preliminary data showed steady throttle in the final seconds before impact and no significant brake application. A final steering input less than 3 seconds before contact brought the vehicle into direct line with the living room. There were no fault codes indicating brake failure or steering malfunction. For Hayes, this supported the working theory that the truck had been steered intentionally into the house. Inside the collapsed room, crime scene personnel treated Marcus Bell's death and the injuries to Alana Brooks as the result of a targeted impact. They mapped where the couch had stood against the interior wall and where each victim had been located when first reached by paramedics. The injury patterns recorded by the medical examiner were consistent with both being seated when the wall and cab crossed the threshold. Nothing suggested that either had been moving toward an exit or attempting to avoid the collision. With Derek Vaughn in surgery and temporarily unavailable, Hayes turned to the broader context of what led the truck to that address. He applied for warrants covering GPS position logs, dispatch messages, and in-cab communications from Sunstate Regional Freight. He also issued preservation requests for door-mounted residential cameras and city street cameras along the route the truck used to enter the neighborhood. Those recordings, later collected, showed the tractor-trailer cutting through turns that had no connection to its scheduled delivery route. Hayes spoke by phone with Sunstate's safety manager and instructed the company to freeze all electronic data tied to Derek's assigned tractor and driver profile. This included electronic logging device records, fuel card transactions, and internal messages sent through the company's dispatch system. An initial summary showed no instruction from dispatch to divert into the Lakewood Drive area and no reported mechanical problem that might justify an unscheduled detour. In the cab, technicians completed a more detailed search. They recovered the broken smartphone fragments, a portable navigation unit still fixed to the windshield, and paper route documents from the passenger seat. The phone components were packaged for forensic reconstruction, while the navigation unit's memory was cloned to compare its suggested path with the actual GPS trace. No alcohol containers or obvious contraband were located. The cloud downloads arrived in stages. Hayes focused first on the Wi-Fi camera account, expecting video confirming what he had already seen. The manufacturer produced files that included not only clips but audio extracted from them. The camera model had a microphone, and when motion alerts triggered, it recorded short segments of sound as well as image. Technicians isolated the recording linked to the final alert before the crash. The video matched the fragments recovered from Derek Vaughn's damaged phone, Alana Brooks entering Marcus Bell's living room, sitting beside him on the couch, and engaging in prolonged physical contact. The audio track, however, added context that had not been available at the scene. After several seconds of indistinct movement, Marcus's voice became clear enough to transcribe. According to the lab transcript, Marcus told Alana that Derek was running loads off the books. He said Derek had been diverting fuel and making unauthorized stops and that if someone reported it, the complaint would reach both the company and law enforcement. Alana replied that she had screenshots of overdrafts and a folder of loan paperwork and that she was done signing 4 debts Derek created. Her tone, described in the notes as firm, suggested discussion of consequences rather than a casual conversation. Hayes issued subpoenas to Sunstate Regional Freight for financial and operational records tied to Derek's work history. The company response confirmed that Derek's trips had been under review before the crash. Internal audits had flagged missing fuel, inconsistent mileage on certain routes, and unexplained gaps between recorded GPS points. A fuel card summary showed purchases at locations where Derek's assigned truck was not present according to telematics. In several instances, fuel volumes exceeded what the truck's tank could reasonably hold. Sunstate provided emails from its compliance department to Derek, requesting explanations for these discrepancies. His replies were brief, citing system errors and miskeyed entries without supporting documentation. The company had scheduled a disciplinary meeting for later in June when the incident on Lakewood Drive occurred. To understand Alana's position, Hayes turned to her personal communications. A warrant to her mobile provider and cloud backup service produced text messages with her mother, 49-year-old medical assistant Celeste Brooks, in the week preceding the crash. In one thread dated June 5, Alana described Derek as increasingly controlling. She wrote that he had insisted on checking her phone and had once locked their bedroom door during an argument, keeping her inside for hours. In later messages, she told her mother she was afraid of Derek's reaction if she left and asked Celeste to save these messages in case she stopped responding. Other texts referenced the same financial strain heard in the camera audio. Alana complained about loan papers in my name and repeated overdraft notices tied to joint accounts. She told Celeste she felt responsible for debts she had not agreed to and that she was considering talking to someone at Derek's company if the situation did not change. The messages pointed to a plan to protect herself, not to harm Derek, but they showed she was weighing options that could end his employment. When the records were assembled, Hayes requested a second interview with Derek, now housed in the jail infirmary under medical supervision. The meeting took place on June 19 and was recorded. After re-advising Derek of his rights, Hayes confronted him with excerpts from the camera audio. He summarized Marcus's statements about loads off the books and Alana's remarks about overdrafts and loan documents. Derek initially repeated his earlier claim that the crash was the result of blind rage after seeing his wife with Marcus. When Hayes referenced the internal review at Sunstate, the flagged fuel card transactions, and Alana's texts about speaking to the company, Derek's explanation shifted. He admitted that Marcus had found out things about his side work and that Alana had threatened to reveal them if he did not change. He said Marcus had turned her against him and that the two of them were setting him up to lose his license and ruin him. Hayes kept the questions on sequence and intent. He asked whether Derek understood, while driving back toward Lakewood Drive, that exposure of the fuel and loan issues could lead to discipline or charges. Derek said he did. Asked why he did not call his supervisor, pull over, or seek legal advice, he answered that he couldn't let them do that and that it had to end. He did not specify what he meant by end until Hayes pressed further about the moment he turned the wheel toward the house. At that point Derek said, "I had to end it before it ended me." He acknowledged that this thought occurred before he left the main road for the neighborhood streets. He admitted he knew his wife and Marcus were likely still in the living room when he aimed the truck at the wall. He did not claim that the steering correction was accidental or that he had tried to miss the structure. The prosecution of Derek Vaughn began in the Orange County Courthouse in Orlando in March 2024, 9 months after the crash on Lakewood Drive. The legal question placed before the jury was narrow: whether the collision that killed Marcus Bell and Alana Brooks was a deliberate act of violence or a moment of uncontrolled panic. In opening statements, prosecutors outlined a sequence built from devices and records rather than speculation. They started with the camera trail. Jurors saw still images from the utility pole video taken on June 9, 2023, showing a man of Derek's build walking from the direction of 2129 Lakewood toward 2147, lingering in Bell's yard near the living room window, then returning the same way. The state then played the Wi-Fi camera clips recovered from the cloud, Alana entering the living room, sitting with Marcus on the couch, and the two of them in sustained physical contact. The accompanying audio, with Marcus referencing loads off the books and Alana speaking about overdrafts and loans, was played in segments while transcripts were displayed on a screen. After establishing the context of suspicion and potential exposure, the state turned to the truck. A reconstruction specialist explained the event data recorder in plain terms. He described how the device captured throttle use, speed, braking, and steering input in the seconds before impact. Jurors were shown a timeline, steady acceleration toward 2147, a single steering correction aligning the tractor's nose with the living room wall, and no meaningful brake application. The expert testified that, based on speed and distance alone, Derek had multiple opportunities to bring the truck to a stop in the street or yard. Instead, the vehicle entered the property and continued forward until the wall collapsed. The same witness addressed the absence of mechanical failure. He told the jury there were no brake fault codes, no steering malfunctions, and no tire blowouts recorded in the data. Photographs of intact brake lines and undamaged tires were introduced. Taken together, the technical evidence supported the conclusion that the truck behaved as it was directed and that the direction came from the driver. Detective Leonard Hayes followed as a key witness. He walked the jury through the steps of the investigation in chronological order: the early decision to treat the address as a homicide scene, the mapping of the approach path, and the collection of digital records. He described locating the small Wi-Fi camera aimed into Marcus Bell's living room, recovering Derek's smashed phone from the cab, and obtaining the cloud backups that preserved the video and audio of the encounter between Marcus and Alana. He then summarized the subpoenas to Sunstate Regional Freight that revealed missing fuel, mileage inconsistencies, and a pending disciplinary meeting. Hayes also testified about Derek's statements. He repeated Derek's description of the U-turn as automatic, his admission that he knew which wall faced the living room, and his comment that it had to stop. Under questioning from the state, Hayes explained why these phrases mattered. They showed, in his assessment, that Derek had time to think between seeing the video and steering into the house, and that the act was tied to both jealousy and fear of being reported. The state then called Alana's mother, Celeste Brooks. She read selected text messages that Alana had sent in the days before the crash. In them, Alana described Derek checking her phone, locking her in their bedroom during an argument, and making her sign loan documents she did not want. One message asked Celeste to save the texts in case she went quiet. Celeste's testimony placed the relationship in a context of control and fear, reinforcing the idea that Alana was preparing to separate herself from Derek and, if needed, disclose his behavior. The defense presented Derek as a man pushed beyond his emotional limits. Their expert focused on stress reactions and argued that the combination of long work hours, marital strain, and the shock of seeing his wife with a neighbor produced a brief collapse of judgment. According to this view, Derek's drive into the neighborhood was described as a fight-or-flight response rather than a calculated attack. The defense emphasized his lack of prior violent history and argued that he did not fully comprehend the consequences of aiming the truck at the house. After deliberation, the jury found Derek Vaughn guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. At sentencing, the judge cited premeditation, the use of a commercial truck as a weapon, and the attempt to destroy digital evidence. Derek received life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In his final report, Detective Hayes summarized the case in one concluding line: a hidden camera, a single notification, and a sequence of decisions that turned a residential street into a double homicide scene.